Welcome back to the Beyond the Bestseller podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Schuknecht, and today's guest is Kira Hartley-Klinger, author of Fabric Wars and also Fabric Wars and More. Kira, welcome to the show. I'd love to have you start out by telling us about your books.
Hi, thanks, Kelly. I was so excited to be here. Yeah, so this book journey started. I published the first one in 2023, the second one in May of 2025. They started by accident. I have a vintage fabric and textile shop on Etsy, and I've been on there, since probably about 2015. I've been buying and selling since 2000 roughly. But I was telling the stories. You know, I go to these estate sales and these auctions, and I meet these people, and I have to go up against the competition, and the auctioneers are always incredibly ridiculous. So I've always been a writer. So I came home and I was creating these listings in my Etsy shop. I started telling all the little stories behind some of the collections, and people just started to write me and message me on Etsy, you really need to write a book. And so they just happened.
Wow. So when they said you really need to write a book, like what about what you were sharing was like of interest to people that they thought you needed to write more around that?
A lot of the stories were just funny. I kind of have a dry sense of humor. I look at people and I have good habit, bad habit, but I can write an entire story based on 5 minutes of spending conversation with a person or being in a competitive moment with the person. So it's really a deep look into, I think, people's traits and characters, not only on the funny side. I've had a lot of people that have really touched me emotionally throughout the years, and they appear in the books. There are stories of where the fabric has come from, like the person who owned it before me. And there are a lot of people that create things and make things and quilt things that like having the history of the materials that they're using. So, you know, I had a woman that was creating a quilt, and she wanted to do it completely with textiles from my shop, and she wanted to write a journal of her own that told the story of every piece of fabric and where it came from, who had it before them, just something about it. So there's a whole bunch of reasons why people were intrigued. But honestly, I think that people came back because they laughed. A lot of the stories just made them laugh. Human nature, we are funny people, you know, and we do funny things.
You mentioned to me before we started recording that
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of a memoir. I noticed on Amazon it has your book. Amazon can be weird sometimes. It puts books in categories that you're like, where did that come from?
Right.
But it does have your book in antique and collectible textiles and costumes. That's an interesting category. And then home-based businesses. That's probably the Etsy part of that. And then women in business. It doesn't even list it in as a memoir, but curious, would you classify it as a memoir, or do those categories that Amazon put it in resonate? Like, what would you say is the best fit for it?
So you know, when you put it on Amazon, you actually pick the categories that you want to be represented in. And sometimes I play around with the different categories to see where I get the most readers. And I have had it in memoirs before, but for some reason the costume part is weird on that. The costume, they could get rid of that. But the antique textile part, I have been in the bestseller category for that multiple times for both books. So it just seemed, I don't know why, but it resonated with them for some reason. So I kind of let that one lay there and say, okay, the costume's kind of weird, but it's talking to somebody out there. I'm due to shake it up again. I might try memoirs again, stick it back in there and see what happens. You know, it does tell the story of other people, but I'm a person that gets squirreled. I can be talking about one thing and all of a sudden I'm on a completely different tangent, and you're going to hear me talk about something completely unrelated for 20 minutes until I've got it out of my system, and then I'll circle back around. So that happens a lot in my books, because sometimes when I'm telling somebody else's story or I'm telling a funny story, it reminds me of something that happened in my own life. And it could be good, it could be bad. I'm in constant observational mode no matter what I'm doing. And every time something happens, it's like, oh, that's going to end up in my book somewhere. Somewhere I'm going to put that in my book. It's just we're so relatable in some ways and completely different in others. So memoir, it could get in there for sure.
So the categories, like the business type categories, do you talk about business and like the Etsy shop that you have? Like, do you give like who's the target audience for your book? Is it people who are doing that kind of home-based business, Etsy shops, that kind of thing?
In regards to that, I would say that it speaks a lot to people who are in resale. I also have an eBay shop. That's where I started my journey so long ago. And Etsy focuses just on the antique fabrics and textiles, but eBay could be anything off the wall. I like to call myself, I'm a female American picker, except I have competition. They never had competition. So you never know what I'm going to buy and sell. But I do talk about the pros and cons of buying and selling online, the hardships, the little rules that get you sometimes, the things that change. So there's a lot of things about the business of buying and selling on both sites or on the internet in general that pops up periodically. So it speaks to that. I would say that sometimes it speaks about just the practice of being employed by yourself and the struggles of being in self-employed and the challenges and hurdles that I have come across, waking up every morning and sitting down. The first thing I do is I'm writing, but I'm looking around. I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to tackle this mess. Holy cow, I haven't weeded the flower gardens in a month. It's just, my brain goes in all these different directions, and it's very hard to be self-employed sometimes. It's very hard to notch out, okay, we get up at 4:30 in the morning. So from 4:30 in the morning until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I am going to do nothing but work. I'm not going to look at anything around the house that needs done. If the dogs need to go out, well, sorry about your luck. It's impossible to do. So there's a lot of just life in the two books, trying to juggle having a home and having other interests and having this business that you want to prosper, and then deciding, well, I'm going to throw some books in the mix too. Why not?
Yeah. Like you have so much extra time to write these
Right,
books.
exactly.
Now, did you take, you mentioned that you had, there was things that you were sharing, like the writing that you were sharing already. So did you take things that you had written for other purposes and kind of compile them for this book? Or did you start writing the book as the book? Does that make sense? Like, was it something that you compiled from other sources, or like a fresh start, like I'm writing this book, even though there's stories I'd told in other ways?
So the book didn't come about right away on Etsy. It didn't come about till about 6 years after I had been selling. I had a lot of people really pushing me to do the book, but like you said, it's hard to notch out that time. I've got a million other things going. I'm familiar with the business of writing and how long it takes to write a book. So it was a matter of finding that time. But the books, if you go into my Etsy shop, there's like rooms. One of my friends calls them my rooms in the shop. And they all have a name that reflects back to the estate or a story about the state from which they came. You have Krabby Patty, you have Honest Abe, CP Wannabe, Yard Cop. It goes on and on, a bungee and a shoestring. They all have a name. And what those are, what you're going to find when you read that listing for that piece of fabric is you're going to find a paragraph, an essay, sometimes 4 paragraphs. But it's going to be a snippet of what happened that day at the sale. And so when it came time for the first book, I already had all of my best fabric sales mostly compiled. I mean, there was still more to come. I just had to elaborate on it. So the chapters in the book just came straight from categories that were once, rooms in my shop. When I got to the second book, I was kind of starting fresh because I had played catch up already, and I had caught up all the ones that were in my shop, and I had even brought in some other stories from my years of selling, and all my best fabric sales. Okay, so now I get to book 2 and I'm all caught up. It's like, uh-oh, where do I start? So that one was kind of starting at the beginning. And every sale that I went to that suggested I might find fabric, or suggested that there might be, because I buy antique quilts too, suggested that there might be something having to do with the fabric or the Etsy shop, I would write about that sale too, even if I ended up getting there and they didn't have what I was hoping for, which happens quite a bit. But I can take a nugget out of the day and say, you won't believe what happened at this sale, or you won't believe what I found. And so I think book 2 pulls in a lot more other things besides fabric that I buy and sell or have bought and sold. It's just a real dive into what it's like to be in the land of buying and selling.
Mm-hmm. So tell me about the writing process. We heard a little bit there. Tell me about, you self-published this book, you mentioned to me, and that was a choice that you made based on, I think you said it was a recommendation from a friend, and this was all pre-recording conversation, but yeah. Tell me a little bit about that and kind of how you approached the publishing process and why you decided to go the self-publishing route.
I started writing as a child. It was the one thing that I wanted to do my entire life. And I wrote in school. I wrote plays and I wrote essays, and I received recognition all the time. I was everybody's favorite student in the English or the composition category. I did not end up going to college. I ended up getting married and starting a family. But I didn't feel like I needed a further education to be a storyteller. I always feel like, I feel like people who write, they need to write. And I feel like storytellers are more born, not made. And I think that where further education would have helped me, and this will come later, is in the editing department, things like that. So I started writing novels. That's where I thought my direction was going to go, because I liked telling stories. I liked making things up. I wrote 400-page novels over the course of 10 years in my mid-20s to early 30s. I had an agent for a couple of years for the first book. He got me a read with a prominent editor over there at Warner, who happened to publish Nicholas Sparks' first book the same time she was considering mine. So that was kind of, it's like, oh man. But that is a long, painful process. It took me a year from the time that I found out that she wanted to read my book. It took me a year to get that rejection. And I had collected already a fairly large box of rejection slips. And you pour your heart into those queries and into those, you had this book. You didn't have the internet. You have this Bible of a book. It's like an encyclopedia that would tell you all of the publishers and editors and agents, and it would tell you in a nutshell what they were looking for. So, that was what you went off of. And these letters, I would put so much into them. And only to find months later that you would get a form rejection letter, nothing personal on it, no handwriting on it, nothing, and you provided them the stamp on that envelope. They had an assistant that basically opened it up, said, nope, put it in, off it goes. You never even got as far as an editor's desk,
Right.
So I gave it up. After 10 years, I was frustrated. I still have those 4 books. I think I have paper copies of them. I know I have floppies, which is really kind of weird to think about floppies at this point, but that's where I started.
For the young people listening to this, Google it.
Right. Google what a floppy looks like, because, that was the world that I lived in. We had a big move, and my daughter was crazy about horses. She was 8 years old when it started. She was 10 when we moved, and she just wanted a horse so badly. I had horses growing up, so I kind of felt the urge, okay, we're going to see what we can do to kind of, What I came up with was we started to volunteer at an equestrian therapy center so that she could get her horse fixed, she could learn about horses, that sort of thing. We spent 4 years there. She consequently ended up earning scholarships for her volunteer work. We won Volunteer of the Year award. I mean, we had all these things surrounding this experience. And I'm like, I got to write about this. It's the greatest thing ever, plus the experiences with these individuals. So I wrote a magazine article, sold it to the first editor that I queried, just like that. I was like, wow.
Wow.
And somebody once upon a time, a long time ago, said, write what you know. And I didn't quite understand what that meant until I had written something that I actually knew something about, So, yeah, it's kind of cool. And then I wrote another one, and the same editor bought the second one. And then life happened. I got divorced. I was a single mom. I finally have these credits that all these publishers want, and I couldn't use them because I needed to make money. So that's how the resale happened. I was doing it on the side gig, side hustle, trying to make extra money, raising my daughter. So it all happened accidentally. So I get to the point where all these people are telling me, you need to write a book, you need to write a book. So I'm like, okay. Now I don't have this big book. I'm sure they still exist, but now you get on the internet. And now you don't quite understand, okay, is that a real publishing house or is that a vanity house? Because when I first started writing, you didn't self-publish unless you were just so full of yourself that nobody else, believed in you. But gosh darn it, I believe in myself so much that I'm going to publish it anyway. They were vanity houses, and it was disgraceful. It was embarrassing. So I couldn't decipher which was which going through the internet. So I have a friend. Her name is Kathleen Glasgow. She wrote A Girl in Pieces. And we were on swim team together when we were 8, 9, 10 years old. Go way back when, And we hooked up on Facebook right around the time that she was writing Girl in Pieces. And Girl in Pieces just took off. She's done remarkably well 9 years later with that book. And she's young adult for anybody who doesn't know who she is. So I wrote her and I said, you know what? I don't know what to do with this. I don't know which direction to go. And she's with a major publishing house, one that everybody dreams about being affiliated with. And she said to me, if I was starting over, I would publish it myself on Amazon. I'm like, what? That's self-publishing. And so I started to dig into it, and it's really, really changed over the years. I mean, really changed. I still was not in a huge position to be able to hire people. I know a lot of people that self-publish, and they hire formatters, and they hire editors, and they hire, they just write the book, which is what every writer wants to do. I just want to write. I want somebody else to do everything else. That couldn't be me. I started to look into what it was going to cost to have somebody to format and edit this 350-page book, and I was like, I can't afford that. So I had to figure it out. And there's ways to do it. If you're savvy enough and determined enough, you can get on the internet, and Amazon has great sites that break it down for you step by step, how to format. The editing, you kind of just have to be diligent with that. I begged and pleaded family members, all these people that were my red pen editors when I was writing novels, please look this over, give me a hand. And everybody, yeah, we'll get to it. Too busy. So I finally just I'm going to edit myself. I went through it half a dozen times, pushed that publish button by the time I had it all done. Now all of a sudden all these people are coming out of the woodworks and saying, on chapter 4, paragraph da-da-da-da-da, I saw this grammatical error, or I saw that all of a sudden all these editors are coming out of the woodwork. It's like, okay, where were you? So Amazon allows you to go in there and make changes and then republish it. So I probably did that a dozen times with the first book before I got to the point where I felt like people were submitting personal opinions, and it's like, okay, you know what? If you want to write a book, go write a book. This is the way I tell the story. This is my voice. This is how it's come across. If there's not a grammatical error in there, I'm going to stick with it. And I had to get to the point where I said enough is enough because I was killing myself. So, but I think I did pay somebody. I got on Fiverr, and I paid a lady in Italy $75 to format the cover of my book because it just boggled my brain. I'm not a tech person. my husband would come home and I would just be anxiety, sweating, swearing, wanting to throw things, just like, I can't do this. And he's like, put it aside, put it away for a little while. It was killing me.
Yeah.
I'm not a tech person. So the cover, $75, no brainer, take it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, if you can find that person. Yeah, I love that. I love the story that you just shared because when you first said vanity publishing, like my heart sank a little bit because so I actually started my career in publishing and I worked for a publishing company that many people were at the time, this was
Mm-hmm.
2007,
Yep.
people were saying, it's vanity publishing, and there was this stigma around it. And yet I was working with all these authors who were bringing their dream to life, so for a lot of people, it's the dream is publishing the book. It
Right.
doesn't have to be a traditional publisher. It doesn't have to sell a million copies. Like what they really want is to get their story out there into the world, right? So, that was what we were helping our clients or our customers do that. And it was great. It was great to see people being able to do that. And yet there was this kind of backlash, like people would criticize those types of books, and which is it's understandable because there's a lot of, like, anyone can publish a book, right? So there's a lot of bad books out there too, and that's not great, but there's a lot of great books that have been self-published. And you're right, like the industry has changed so much. Like now when I work with authors and they'll ask, like, should I get a traditional publisher? I'm like, there's really no point anymore. I mean, yes, you can. And if you are dead set on that, that credibility that it brings your book, then by all means pursue it. Like if you feel like you're not legitimate as an author unless you get picked up by a traditional publisher, then pursue that route. But otherwise, I wouldn't worry about it. I wouldn't focus on that if if your real goal is to get the book out there and to share your story with the world, in many cases, like to help build your business, to build your credibility as the person in your business, then just get it out there, right? Don't worry about the form of publishing. So anyway, I love that you shared that story because it's like exactly my experience in the industry and the shift that I have seen over the years, and I believe it's so true. The other thing I want to mention about what you said is the three things I always tell people if they are wanting, if they're self-publishing and they're kind of like, okay, what will this cost me? I always tell people to consider these three things for investing in their book. The book cover. So you just mentioned that, like have a professional cover designed, editing, which you also mentioned. You didn't have the budget for it, and that's okay. But that's one thing that if you have a budget for it, consider or for sure get your book edited. And then interior formatting. So for the print version of the book, having it formatted so that it's not just words on the page, but it has some design elements and it just looks, it can make it look really nice. So those are three things I always mention to people, like just, if you have a budget for putting that into your book, those are the things to consider. And again, you kind of spoke to those as well in your experience, that you wish you could have had it edited, you just couldn't, and that's okay. But
Yeah.
but you do get people that you could have beta readers, maybe you hand it out to 10 or 20 people that can give you some feedback and help with some of the minor grammatical errors and things like that. But there's ways to get around it. But if you have a budget, those are the three things I always recommend. Kira, so I just want to ask about the book and the business. So how does your book, how do you feel like your book has contributed to your business, or vice versa? Like how do you feel like that book kind of plays into your overall marketing strategy or just outreach for your company?
So I think one of the misconceptions when you traditionally publish a book is that you are going to write the book and they are going to do absolutely everything else. That you can just write to your heart's content and you don't have to worry about anything else. I can tell you, my friend with a traditional publisher is on Instagram on the daily, pushing, Just because you
Yes.
have a traditional publisher does not mean that you are off the hook for doing any of the legwork to promote your book. You're just not. So by already having my book prompted by customers, I already had my audience going into it. So bringing the two of them together, the book supports the business and the business supports the book. And I also started doing, I had to figure out how I was going to promote, how I was going to market this book. And I thought about who my audience would be. Well, the first audience that I leaned into were people that used fabric and textiles. So I started to contact all of these different quilting guilds. And I started to do guest speaking gigs for the quilting guilds. I'd bring some in my shop, I'd bring the book, I'd read from my book. I sell 100 times more books in person than I do on Amazon. And that's another misconception too, is that you're just going to publish your book on Amazon and the whole world is going to see you and this is going to determine whether or not you're going to make or break. It doesn't.
Right.
Whoever determines if you're going to make or break is you. My reviews on Amazon for the books, I just published the second one in May. I have one shining star review, one review on the second book. But I don't sell the majority of my book on Amazon. Yes, I just did a big library gig thing because my friend and I we did a children's book. We just did a big library event for all the books. And yes, afterwards, I did sell some books because of the event on Amazon. But, I can't tell you how many books I sold while I was there. Being able to take your book, present it, for me, has been the best choice. And it also brings customers to my shop. Another thing that I like to do when I sell something, either on eBay or Etsy, because either audience really can benefit from it. It's all buying and selling. I have, yes, they're pre-printed little notes. This is about me. Here's a review. This is my book. This is what I do. Whatever. A little bit about me. I always write on it in hand. I appreciate you. Something along those lines. It goes in the package. So this is free marketing, and I have given out, oh my gosh, thousands of these notes at this point. Yes, some of them result in book sales. Some of them probably hit the trash without being read, but it's an easy button. It's a no-brainer. And coincidentally, I sent one of those notes 6 weeks after I published the first book. A woman that was a customer wrote me back, and she said, my name is so-and-so. I am a TV producer. How do you feel about reality TV? And it was like, what? Really? Who are you? Is this a joke? Because honestly, that's something that happens. As soon as you self-publish a book, you get some of these vanity publishing houses that chase you down. I have one that leaves me voicemails constantly trying to get me to, anyway. So I thought it was a joke. I thought it was another scam. But the message came through on Etsy. So there was some part of it that had to be legitimate. So I looked into the history and found out, oh my gosh, she bought a $3 fabric scrap from me. And I like to joke that I finally, a publisher or a TV producer finally paid me $3 to be interested in me. All those years that I spent trying to push the traditional publishers in these long, heartfelt, thought-provoking letters that never even made it out of an assistant's hands, my gigantic box of rejection notes. And I took 2 seconds to put this pre-printed note in the right envelope at the right time. So yeah, we have a contract. I don't know if it's going to go anywhere. She sees these crazy auction stories on TV one day. I live in rural Midwest. It could be fun, but it's just random. You never know where it's going to take you. But whether traditional or self-publishing, if you don't push it yourself, you determine your own future in it, is what it comes down to.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, you have such a great just testimonial of, how that book contributes to your business and how you can use a book or like you have a couple books within your business for your marketing strategy. And I love the personal notes piece that you added there. I love that. That's great. Well, Kira, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I'm going to wrap us up here. We are, yeah, we are like pushing the 30-minute mark. I'm usually like 20 to 30 minutes, and we've had so much to talk
Yeah,
about, so that was great.
I'm bad.
But before, no, no, I love it. You definitely are a natural storyteller because you just had these great stories that you wanted to share, and I love it. But before we wrap up, I just want to ask you where listeners or watchers, viewers can find you online and learn more about you. We'll link to the book in the show notes, but where else can people find you online?
Okay, so I have a Facebook author page out there. I'm trying really hard to be better on my LinkedIn page. You can find me over there. I am a frequent offender on Instagram. I like to post videos about dating fabric, and I have sales. I'm pushing the shop all the time on Instagram, so you can find me there. Of course, you can find me on Etsy. You can message me. I am very good at getting back on my emails. It is required. I'm a 5-star seller on both stores, and one of the requirements is to message people back right away. So I'm super disciplined in that. I will write you back. The books can be picked up on Etsy, and I can sign them. They make really super fun gifts for people in your life that, like to read or are into that type of memoir, whatnot.
Yeah. Well, great. Thank you so much, Kira. We'll share all of that in the show notes, and thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. It was fun.
Looking for a community of women writers to support and inspire you on your journey? Join the Author Power Circle. Connect weekly with fellow authors, stay accountable, and move your book forward in an encouraging community. Learn more at kellyschuknecht.com.